Hello, hello, and welcome to the Lewiston Second Ward podcast. My name is Debbie Presnell, and we're excited to introduce you to all the incredible people in Lewiston Second Ward. The goal of this podcast is to get to know each other better and to create unity in our ward by sharing life and gospel experiences with each other. Today we're in the home of Mulloy and Jeanne Hansen, who truly are some of the most amazing people I know. And I'm so excited for our ward to get to know you better. Thank you, Hansens, for having us in your home, and welcome to this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I've been so looking forward to this interview because I really do think you're amazing. I love the way you live your life. So I wanted to share with you that just recently my mother, who just turned 103, made a statement. She gives advice. She's got lots of it. It's good advice. She made a statement that I thought was profound, and I wanted to share it with you. She said, "Life is too short and eternity too short to not be focused on things that are eternal." So when we were talking about people that we could possibly interview for this podcast and your name came up, I thought immediately of that statement that my mom had made, that advice she'd given, because I think that that's how you live your life. I think that could be the Hansen family motto from my point of view, would be life is too short and eternity too short to not be focused on things that are eternal. So for that reason, I'm really excited for our ward, who already knows you and loves you and cares a lot about you. I'm excited for all of us to get to know a little bit more about you. So let's get started. Let's start with your childhood memories. Where did you grow up? What was your family life like as children? Where did you live?
You want to start with me?
Sure.
Okay, I was born in Salt Lake City.
Cool.
I was the seventh of 10 children. My dad was I always thought of him as a traveling salesman. He sold automotive parts, worked for several different companies. We lived in Salt Lake City. I lived on Windsor Street, about 3 or 4 blocks from Liberty Park.
Cool.
I took dancing lessons at the stage there. My brother fed the goats on a little island in the pond that was there. The park is totally different now, but my merry-go-round is still there, and so is my slippery slide.
Does a merry-go-round work?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
As far as I know. They made a movie with that merry-go-round in it.
Which movie?
A little girl.
On a merry-go-round?
The kidnapping. Savannah Smiles.
Savannah Smiles.
Yeah. My park is in that movie.
That's cool.
We had a duck that we named Bingo, and he was really cool. My dad brought him home with a new car. Just before Easter, they were giving away ducks with new cars.
It's a sales pitch you'd never hear today.
We named him Bingo because he ran across the countertop and fell on his nose. Just tripped and so we called him Bingo. We thought he was a great duck, but then he started laying eggs. So we had to think of him as a different duck.
It was more like a girl duck.
Another time my dad brought home a dog, 6-week-old Russian wolfhound. And I remember that dog going up to my mother, putting his paws on her shoulder to lick her face.
Oh.
This is a 6-week-old puppy. We could not keep Tanya in the yard. She jumped 6-foot fences.
Wow. Your mom kept that dog after you licked her in the face. That's amazing.
Tanya didn't stick around very long. She kept getting out and got lost. So, anyway.
So you were one of 10 children. What was that like?
Noisy.
Uh-huh.
What I remember most is that the 5 younger of us were a lot closer to each other than we were to the older ones. I was the middle of 3 girls, so I always felt like the middle child, even though I wasn't the middle. I was in between those girls. We had a lot of fun growing up. My mom did a lot of sewing and made most of our clothes for fancy Sunday dresses. We all used she used the same pattern for all of us. My sister always got blue, I always got pink or red, and my younger sister got either green or purple or yellow or whatever Mom found in the same pattern.
That's cool that her decisions were made.
Yeah, I always had to wear pink.
So you took dance as a child, and when I think of your daughter that passed away, Colleen, I think of her dancing all the time. Every time she was in my home. She was doing a little dance.
Oh, she loved to dance.
So was that part of your home, or was it? Did you take dance, or?
I think it was a program that my mother was able to get us into. With so many, there were not a lot of things that we could all do outside of the home, extracurricular stuff, but she managed this park program. And my two sisters and I were able to take these little dance classes. We were tap dancers, and we tapped to On the Good Ship Lollipop, and I still remember part of that dance.
Yeah. That's so your sisters took dance also, so that was just kind of a part of what you guys did.
Yeah. Both my mom and dad were very musical. Dad was a conductor, a fantastic conductor. Mom was a singer. She sang with the Seattle Opera when I was in high school.
That's where you get that talent from.
She was in the chorus, and they both sang with a group called the Seattle Chorale. It was another large choir in that area. Back in Salt Lake, my dad started a choir when I was very young that was called the Sacro Dolce Choir. That was still going last I heard.
That's awesome.
When I was about 6, we moved to California for a couple of years, then back to Salt Lake. And when I was about 11, my dad was transferred to Seattle. So we lived in Bellevue for my growing up years.
So your high school years then, junior high about time, on through high school, was in Seattle,
Was
in Bellevue. That's awesome.
I grew up in Bellevue.
How about you, Mulloy? Where did you grow up?
So I'm from southern Alberta. My
Yay, Canada.
ancestors, it's interesting, 3 of my grandparents were American and came up to Alberta for land, and the other grandfather came from Scotland.
Cool.
Some of our time there was in farming. My dad was in the Navy for my younger years. We lived in Halifax over on the east coast in Nova Scotia, and in Victoria on Vancouver Island on the west. So we had both sides of the continent. And then he ended up in Edmonton, and after he got out of the Navy, he decided to go back to farming. So we moved to southern Alberta, and from probably age 9 until 12, 2 or 3 years, we lived in a small farming community.
So southern Alberta, is that known for farming? What kinds of things did you grow?
Sugar beets, corn. We had the first winter we fed 500 steers to fatten them up to sell.
Wow.
And us boys had the responsibility to feed them morning and night. A whole bunch of pigs.
That's where you learn to be responsible.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many children were in your family?
So we had 8. I was the second of 8. And then went to school, and I usually had a pretty easy task in school. One of the problems in my early years, I was very cross-eyed.
Oh.
And so they call it bullying now, but it was more like assault.
I think bullying is kind of like assault.
I think more days I had bloody noses.
Oh, because of your cross eyes?
And it was usually older people. Older kids would just. And my dad had a rule: you can't fight on the school grounds. So he had been a boxer, both as an amateur and then in the Navy. And so I learned how to box. And young boys don't like getting hit in the face, so usually after I got pretty good at that, the assaults diminished.
So did you just wait for them to come off the school grounds?
No, there was one incident. My dad was just absolutely beaming. We were living in Edmonton, and we'd moved to he had been discharged from the Navy and was doing construction or something, and we were living off the base where we had lived before. There were these 3 older boys that were waiting for me after school, and the rule was you couldn't fight on the school grounds. So we lived 2 or 3 blocks away. So I ran down the street to my home, and these kids were chasing me, And then we got to my front yard, and I took care of him. And my dad was standing in the living room.
He got to see it.
He got to see it.
It's a proud moment.
It was a very proud moment. I think that was about the last time that
I was going to say, I bet they were waiting
I was
for you the next
never
day.
a fighter except in self-defense.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And so then, for some reason, about 9 or so, when we moved back to the farm, the eyes kind of got better. I'm still a little bit.
So you didn't have that corrected? They just corrected
never
the
need surgery.
Wow.
My dad believed in chiropractic, so I did a lot of chiropractor stuff, but it never did anything. So anyway, so I grew up in southern Alberta. We moved off the farm and went to Lethbridge, which was the big city in southern Alberta.
Uh-huh.
And I was there for 6th grade and then through junior high and high school. My dad, when I was in high school, started to work for the church, building churches, and initially did that in southern Alberta. During high school, I was pretty much into sports. So I played basketball. Played varsity basketball and football. I was a quarterback of the high school football team.
Saw that farming, farm work.
Yeah, so that was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was in 11th grade, I had a teacher who had married a Canadian, but she was American. And I remember I used to go home for lunch, and I went home and my mom was crying, and I asked her what was wrong, and President Kennedy had been shot.
Oh.
And then I went back to school, and my first class was literature, and that was the teacher that was the American, and she was a total basket case.
I have such a vivid memory of that day. I was on the playground, 6th grade.
And even up in Canada, we broadcast the funeral throughout the school.
Yeah.
I was homesick that day, and I watched it happen on TV.
Wow.
Yeah.
We all got sent home. As soon as the news came out, they sent us home. Yeah, I remember that. Really
So
well.
when I was in 9th grade, I had to choose a foreign language for high school. And there were only 2 options, Latin and French.
Let me guess, French, right?
Because it's up in Canada. So it was a big discussion because at that time I was pretty thinking of going into medicine. Throughout high school, I changed away from that, and then I came back to that on my mission. So the high school counselor, who was actually a member of the church and a seminary teacher, he was also our junior high counselor. He recommended Latin because of my interest in medicine. And so I decided I had to pray about it because I knew that French would be good for a mission, but Latin would be good for medicine. And I prayed, and I got a distinct answer that French I should take, so I took French. And then later, when my dad was building a church in San Jose when I finished my first year of college, and so I spent the summer with them and preparing to go on a mission. And it was in a Spanish-American ward, so the bishop, all of their meetings were in Spanish, and I blessed the sacrament in Spanish, and so when he was filling out the application, he talked about foreign language, and I said I had 3 years of French in high school, and he said, well, Spanish is really close to that. So he put on the application, he recommended a Spanish-speaking mission.
Close to French. Hey, that's a leap.
Well, no, it is very.
And I remember
Is
telling
it?
my dad, the bishop put down Spanish, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be, I'm going to go to France. And so when the call came, it was to Paris, France.
That's so awesome. My
Yeah.
brother went to France. He loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
there are a lot of similarities between French.
Is
and
there
Spanish.
really? I would have never guessed
Well,
that.
the interesting
Same
thing.
with Italian.
Interesting thing is, there was the Western Mediterranean District, which was military branches in Spain, Morocco, and the Azores, was administered by our mission.
Cool.
And in the latter part of my mission, I was serving in the mission home, and I was what was called the mission coordinator. We were mainly involved with the relationship between members, the district presidencies, and that sort of thing. And once a year, the mission president would go to Spain for a branch conference tour. So I got while I was in France, we did run into Spanish-speaking people, much like the Mexicans came up here. Spanish people would come into France to do mainly housekeeping and jobs like that, and so we would contact them periodically. So I bought a Spanish grammar book in French, and studied that through my mission. So I got invited with the mission president and his wife to go on this branch presidency tour, or the
Branch conference.
The branch conference tour. So we went to Morocco, and then we went to Rota, which is near Cadiz, and then to Seville, and then we flew to Lisbon and out onto the Azores, then came back to Madrid.
Wow, that was a tour.
The Freedom of Religion Act had just been passed in Spain in November of 1968, and this was March of '69. So the district president, who was a military officer at Torrejon Air Base in Madrid, organized the first Madrid branch, the first member branch, and so I got to speak at each of these branch conferences, and I got to give a talk in the branch conference. So I was the first full-time missionary to preach the gospel in Spain in Spanish.
That's awesome. That's pretty incredible, Mulloy.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's amazing.
And one of the branch presidency members in the Seville branch was a man named Robert D. Hales.
Oh.
He was a counselor in the branch presidency.
Really?
And he was the president of Gillette in France.
That's awesome.
So his career was with Cheeseboro Ponds.
That's really cool.
But anyway, that's my...
So you served a mission for...
mission. Came home to...
So missions back then. When my brother went, it was a 2.5 year. Is that what you served?
It was 2.5.
2.5 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So came back from France.
And my parents had moved back to Issaquah, where he had built a chapel when I was just out of high school.
So you guys were kind of like in...
And so we met at a pool party of the MN Gleaners. You
That's
remember
good
those?
enough.
Okay.
We don't want to hear any more about the swim party, right?
I was the last of the Gleaners. They changed the program from when I left primary. The year behind me, everything changed. So I was the last of the Gleaners. And so...
They saved the best for last, Jeannie.
They were still the eminent Gleaners. Now they're the young adults. And it was a great party. We had a lot of fun.
So, Jeannie, at that time...
It took me 3 weeks to remember his name.
Oh, so not a really good first impression, right?
Well, no, it wasn't that. I just couldn't remember his name.
Oh.
Besides, she was promised
sister.
to somebody else.
You already had somebody.
Yeah, he was off in Idaho.
Well, I was going to ask you what you were doing, like while Mulloy was on his mission. What were you doing? Were you at school? Were you?
Well, she didn't know me at that time.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I went to high school in Bellevue.
Right.
Graduated in '67. Right.
Mm-hmm.
About the time he was going on his mission.
Uh-huh.
Well, a year behind.
I played the cello from 6th grade through high school.
I know you played the cello. That's awesome.
Well, it's under there.
There's one right there. I see it.
It doesn't get out very often, but one of these days I'll get back to it.
That's cool.
After high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. We couldn't afford for me to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job working at a photo booth.
Fun.
Film booth, where they bring their film and I send it out to be
developed
and then bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
Which was pretty good. My dad was a photographer, called himself an amateur photographer, but he developed his own pictures. And I used to love watching him, standing in the dark room with my dad, watching those pictures come
to life.
On the picture.
So you guys met at the pool party, and it was 3 weeks before you could remember Mulloy's name. So
well, we saw each other almost every day.
Oh, you did?
I just couldn't remember his name.
Twice a week.
Well, a couple of times a week.
Because of activities?
Because of activities.
Yeah. My sister happened to be the secretary for the Eminent Cleaners at the time. And I would have to ask her what his name was. What's that guy's name again?
But one of her friends who they were married, weren't they?
Oh, Jeanne?
Dennis and Jeanne.
No, Dennis was married to Penny.
To Penny.
His older brother came home a few months before he did they were
6
out on
months.
mission.
We actually
together.
went out together, but he went to England, so he came home 6 months earlier.
Yeah. And he married one of my best friends at the time.
Uh-huh.
I was in the wedding party. I was a bridesmaid. And what was it your mom said? No, you said. They sent pictures to him.
I didn't say anything. My next youngest brother, who was also on a mission in Tennessee, wanted to know more about her because
Wrong brother.
But anyways, we were in midsummer.
Well, your mom's response to that, was no, but maybe from Mulloy.
Anyway, so
She was right.
We got asked to participate in a dance exhibition for a dance that was going to be midsummer, and so I agreed to do that because I knew tango and cha-cha and waltz and that.
So was that called a floor show then? Because that's what it was called.
A floor show.
Floor show.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was kind of a floor show.
That's what they called it when I was growing up.
So, and it turned out we ended up being partners. And so after, 2 or 3 practices, we'd practice 2 or 3 times a week. I asked her out and she wouldn't even let me take her home. And then finally we took my mom up to visit her parents in southern Alberta and left her there, my dad and I. Came back. And and during this time it was just like every time that I was away from her was all I could think about was the next time we could meet, even though she still wouldn't date me. and so we were to go 2 weeks later. We were going to go up and pick my mother up, and so I said, how'd you like to take a little family trip to Canada? It wouldn't be a date.
A date hidden in a family trip.
Her mom had already fallen in love with me.
She always liked him best, even when she couldn't remember any of the rest of us. She still knew him.
It worked, Jeannie.
Yeah, I was always her favorite. Anyway, so she agreed to come up with me, and during that trip, between the words "the eagle has landed" and that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, and the eagle has landed.
No, eagle has landed first.
No, well, that's right.
Yeah, they couldn't get out.
Anyway, between those two, I proposed to her.
Oh, cool. And did she say yes, or was she?
She said yes.
So it just took the family trip.
We were in a car filled with all the family
That's awesome.
in the back seat, but the windows were down, and so nobody could hear us.
You just about had to say
That
yes.
she could hear everything. Okay, imagine this. He's sitting by the window. I'm sitting next to him. His sister is crunched up against me with a brother on the other side of her.
Oh, because this is before the seatbelts,
Mom,
right?
Dad, and one of the boys is in the front seat.
And a little brother in the
his
window.
little brother is in the window with his head right behind us. He's laying across the back of the window.
That's such a good story. Love it. And you had to
so
say yes,
romantic.
Jeannie. You couldn't have said no.
I'd
You
have
were
been kicked out of
surrounded.
the car.
That's
if I said no.
You were
So we decided to get
surrounded.
married at Christmas. This was July 20th. Her mom said, well, I'm not driving to Canada because the options were Idaho Falls, Calgary, or Cardston, or Oakland. Those were the closest temples. So, of course, I was going to go back to Canada for pre-med. Her mom said, there's no way I'm driving to Canada
She didn't
in
love you that
December."
much then.
In December.
Oh, in December, please.
So we met May 28th. We got engaged July
We met June
Or-
21st.
June 21st, that's right. I got home May 28th. Met June 21st. Got engaged on July 20th and married September 6th.
Wow, that was what, 3 months after your mission?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
55 years ago.
55 years.
55 years on Friday.
That's awesome.
The
Not
funny
many
thing
people
about
And that was a Friday that we got married, too.
The funny thing about that day, his parents were all, I don't know what you'd call it, but they were all into it. His dad's driving, all these people in the car.
We haven't told them yet.
We stopped,
We stopped at one
we
grandparent.
stopped at one grandparent's house where we watched the eagle land. Then we drove about an hour to Cardston to the other grandparent's house. Halfway between is when he asked me.
Proposed.
So we leave grandma's house and we're driving up. They take us up to
The temple first.
the temple in Cardston. And drive around the temple. You guys want to get out and walk around, see the grounds?
This is where we got married.
They're really
They don't know yet that you've asked,
they're really
right?
subtle. Then they're driving up, and there's this windy road, and they're driving us up. They take us to Waterton National Park, where they went on their honeymoon. Would you like to see this place? This is really
Well,
pretty.
that was where they met, too. And then they went on
Yeah,
their
they
honeymoon.
met. Yeah.
They met at a dance.
So we leave there, and we're on this windy road, and she said yes. Now picture a windy road, hairpins, right?
Right.
Well, not quite hairpins.
Dad's driving. Both hands go straight up in the air. He turns straight around looking at us. Really?
With the car. Eyes on the road.
Hopefully Mom had her hand on the
I
steering
had
wheel.
a heart attack just then.
That's so awesome. I can't believe you asked in that crowded car and nobody heard.
Oh, he's so romantic. He took his dad to get engagement ring.
I didn't take him to it. It just, we were coming home from work. I was working with him.
However it worked, it was perfect because for 55 years, not many people can say that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when you look
Anyway.
at family relationships that you've had, what are some of your relationships in your family that have had the biggest impact on your life?
I think my mom, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
She had such a reverence for the prophet and for the gospel that we just knew. I have never ever in my life doubted that Joseph Smith was a prophet, that the Book of Mormon was true, and that the prophet today is a prophet because of her reverence for him.
How about you, Mulloy?
Growing up, as one of the older brothers, there were always scuffles and things like that. I would be lying if I said that we were all really close, but we've become very close. And now, all of my siblings have been married in the temple, and we have activities together, and it's just a wonderful family.
There's nothing better than family and that relationship. So let's move on to your professional life. What's that been? You raised children, right?
I raised children.
How many children?
8.
8 children. That's a full-time plus job. You had overtime.
Oh yeah, 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People always asked me, how you do it? How do you manage with 8 kids? Well, you do it one day at a time. You do it one kid at a time. We didn't start out with 8 kids.
Right.
We started with 1, and by the time you get to 5, you've got big kids to help.
Mm-hmm. Right.
5 was probably the hardest number. First it was 3 was hard because you only have 2 laps.
Right.
Then 5, you've only got 4 arms between you.
So 5 you run out of hands,
And by that
3 you
time,
run out of laps.
Yeah.
by that time, we moved to Bellevue when Amy was a baby. I was expecting Julia. He got called into the bishopric shortly after her. Maybe it was while Julia was after she was born or whatever. Don't remember when.
It was after she was born.
So we sat on the front row, 2 rows actually. I put the older kids in front of me and the younger ones on either side of me. And that's how we did sacrament meeting for many years, because he was always on the stand. The idea was that he could give them the evil eye if they were acting up. In all the years that he was sitting on that stand, as bishop, as a member of the bishopric, as a bishop himself, as a high councilman, never once looked down at his kids.
No evil eyes coming, huh?
The one time we, I had the 4 kids in front. The 2 oldest, Jacoby and Phil, were acting up, and I leaned over to him. I don't know if you remember Elder Royden G. Derrick. He was a member of the 70, and he was serving as the temple president in Seattle at the time.
And he lived in our ward.
And he was in our ward, so he's sitting on the stand. He wasn't there every week, but this particular day he was sitting on the stand. Dad, of course, was not looking at the kids. I leaned forward to the kids and I said, "You guys need to settle down. Elder Derrick is watching you." And they looked up. Elder Derrick was laughing at my kids.
There's no help at all, right?
No help at all.
Between you and Elder Derrick, nothing was going on good.
No help at all.
That's awesome.
It was good.
So you raised these incredible children. I just have to say right now that, so I don't forget it, I have heard Amy Larson give a lot of lessons, really, really good lessons, before you guys moved to Lewiston. And there was never a time, ever, that she taught anything that she didn't refer to your example and how good you were. So when you guys came to Lewiston, we were prepared for this great family, and that's what we got.
Really got let
No, that's exactly what we got. No letdown there. So Mulloy, I know you're a doctor. Tell me about that.
So when I got home from my mission, I had decided within the last 6 months or so that I wanted to go into medicine. I had come back to that notion, and so it was possible to get in with 3 years of pre-med if you got a degree. So I came home and went into to university in Lethbridge, and I got a degree in major in biology and chemistry, double major, and a minor in psychology. Had a 4.0.
Cool.
So graduated, and it was about a year before my entering class that I submitted my application, and I got a call from one of the doctors that was on the admissions committee, and she said, I've seen your application and we're very impressed, but we're wondering, we haven't received your MCAT results. And I said, I haven't taken it. I was too late to get into it, and so I'm planning to take it in a couple of months, because they only did do it in the spring and the fall. And she said, well, we'll waive the MCAT.
Wow.
We're going to take you anyway. And then
that's
she
pretty
said,
incredible too.
Yeah, and she said, so I'm going to be down in Calgary on such and such a date, so I need you to come up for an interview. And I said, I'm working, I was working nights at the jail as a jail guard.
You needed all the psychology you could
And I
get.
said, I just don't see how I can get away. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, we'll waive the interview. But she says, but you have to take the psychological test, and we can set it up at your university. And that was my admission to medical school.
That's incredible. I bet there's nobody else on the face of the earth that has that story. No. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So you then, now you guys were married at this time, right? Any children? When you went through med school,
do you want to hear a bad story, though?
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah.
When I came home from my mission, I was so intent on going into medicine that I was afraid to pray about it.
Oh.
And so I never did.
You were afraid of what answer you would get?
I was afraid I would get a no answer. Uh-huh. But, in subsequent years, I've come to know that it was...
That's not a bad story.
What I should do.
I think the Spirit guided you, right? I mean, you're pretty close to the Spirit, Mulloy. I think of you that way.
You can look back on that, but I never specifically
Prayed about it for fear.
prayed
huh?
about what I should go into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Because there's a lot of risks in medicine. There are a lot of
There's
doctors
so many
that
risks,
that
yeah.
that don't stay active.
hmm because it
Yeah.
takes you away from your family.
Well, not
Did
just
you
that.
did you find that
What?
as you were doctored? Was it a lot of time away from home, or were you able to find practices where you could kind of work around that?
No, I mean, most of my career has been very family friendly.
Solo
I probably
classes
spend
mostly.
more time away playing basketball.
Church sports got annoying more than most.
So anyway, so I went to medical school. I ended up, I think I was third in my class. I took the national board, which I needed for licensure in the United States. And I was 99th percentile in the national board.
That's amazing. So what brought you to Lewiston?
So I practiced for a little while in southern Alberta,
Mm-hmm.
and we lived the wind is constant there. And we'd built a house that was on the west side of Lethbridge, and the prevailing wind comes from the west, and all of the development was west of us. And so there was just constant wind and dust. And it was causing keratoconus in Jeannie's eyes,
Oh.
which is a condition where it could lead to corneal transplant.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me if I stayed there, I'd go blind.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. What year was that?
I was in
76.
76.
So what did you do from there?
Somebody in the family said that the Issaquah Clinic was advertising for a doctor. And I had, because I took the national boards, I actually had a license in Washington before I had one in Alberta. And so I just did that, called them up, and they wanted to see me. We did an interview, and they hired me. And so I worked there from 76 to 81, and then they were going to sign up with a company which would mandate that we arrange for abortions.
Mm.
And I was against that, so I decided so I quit
Good for you.
and went into a solo practice.
That takes a lot of faith.
And that I maintained until
So then you guys came to Lewiston from there in what year?
2009.
2009.
Yeah.
Did you come here because Amy was here, or was this
Well,
just what made she's
Col-
Lewiston?
no,
Colleen had a dream.
Colleen had cancer,
Right.
and
Now, was she diagnosed with that before you came to
yes,
Lewiston?
uh-huh.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah,
and she was in remission. Had been in remission for 3.5 to 4 years, and we thought, as bad as it was, if she made it 3 years, then she was good for life. That she would never have a problem with it. So,
But before this diagnosis, she had a dream.
no, not before the diagnosis. This was before we moved. The
I
dream,
thought it was before she even got the diagnosis. It
Uh-uh.
was before Logan was born.
the dream about living in her basement.
Yeah.
No, that was just before that was in 2008.
Anyway, she dreamed that we were living in her basement. And
She dreamed you here.
Yeah. She went to Mark and said, what would you think about having our parents live in the basement? And he said, well, I don't know why they'd want to, but sure.
Because we had bought this property with Mark.
This property that your
Yeah,
house
that
owns
was
on
the
now.
other
And so the plan was, when we retired, we would build a house and stay here.
She called us.
Because originally we were going to build up near the temple.
Oh.
And
This
then,
is when they bought this. They bought the whole property, and they
Right.
said, but we don't want to use the whole thing. So this is what brought us here. She said, if you'll buy the other half of it, they didn't want to sell it to just anybody. If you'll buy the other half of it, we'll help you build your house. And then when you go on your mission, we'll take care of your house. And when you get old, we'll take care of you.
Oh.
We're holding Mark to that.
Yeah. Poor Mark. I bet he's up to the task.
so anyway, about would have been in 2008, I had this unsettled feeling like I needed to change something, but I couldn't figure out what it was, and I prayed about it. And how it sometimes it's something that comes before you get a calling. So I thought maybe there's a calling that's coming. But but I couldn't get any kind of an answer as to what it was. So I decided, President or Elder Bednar had given a talk about his wife being asked to say a prayer, but only to thank, only a prayer of gratitude.
That's one of my favorite all-time talks.
Yeah.
I love that talk.
So anyway, so I decided to go a week without asking for anything.
Just
And
expressing
it was a very interesting experience. I mean, the first prayers were pretty short. But as I continued, my mind got open to so many things that God had a hand in my life that I'd never realized before. And finally, on Saturday morning, I was praying, and I don't know how revelation comes to you, but occasionally words come into my mind. It's not like a voice or whatever. But the words were, "You've made some wonderful plans for your life, but you haven't asked me." And because our general plan was to work till I was 65 and then to retire and go on missions. And
That changed from 60 to 62 to
and
65.
I was 61.
67.
I was 61 then. And that was a Saturday. Tuesday was when Colleen called and said, "Dad, I had this dream that you were living in our basement." So Amy was always trying. She was doing my billing for my office, and she was always trying to get me to come over here and
She started recruiting as soon as she and Mark
put
got married.
up a shingle. And that same week, it could have been like the Tuesday night, I was on a board for a Medicaid company called Molina. They had a physician advisory board. Then the basic purpose was we'd meet about once every 3 months, and we'd talk about issues of trying to get more specialists to take our patients, because that was a big problem in the Seattle area. So
In
I
the
went
Lewiston area.
So I went to this meeting, and it was in that same week. It was weird.
It's amazing how someone sees
they
the
had
big picture.
They had invited this guy who was a retired cardiovascular surgeon who had seen the problem in Snohomish County, which is north by Everett, that very few family practices were taking new patients, and it was very difficult for Medicaid and Medicare patients to get a doctor. And so he opened up a clinic with nurse practitioners to take care of that population. And I was just inspired by it. So I called up Amy, and I said, "What's the situation in Lewiston in terms of Medicare and Medicaid?"
She was working for Dr. Allen then, wasn't she?
Oh, she had been, yeah. And she said, there's no problem at all. I said, nobody takes it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
exactly
I said,
right.
You don't understand what I mean. What if I was a patient that had Medicare or Medicaid? What would be my chances of getting a doc? And she said, I don't think it would be good at all.
She's right.
But she said, I have a friend, and I think it was
Next door neighbor? Mary Lou?
No.
Maurer?
Mowers, yeah. Remember Mowers, Brother Mowers' wife?
Candy?
Candy, yeah.
Oh, yes.
She worked for the Medicaid office.
Yes,
and
she
said,
did. That's right.
She said, I know somebody at the Medicaid office, I'll call. So she called up Candy. Amy said, she said, what's the situation with Medicaid? And she said, we have 2,000 patients on Medicaid in Lewiston that can't get a doctor. And she said, well, my dad is talking about coming, and Candy started to cry. She said, there's an outfit in Spokane that's trying to open a clinic here, a branch clinic, to take care of that population, and they can't find a doctor. So we called them up and met with them, and long story short, initially they lost their grant for that year. This was in 2008, and then but the United Way still wanted to go ahead and do it, so we were going to open a clinic just with United Way.
Uh-huh.
And then Chaz said got the grant came through in 2009. That's when we moved.
So when you came here, did you sign a contract with them, Mulloy, or?
Yeah.
And that was a contract for so many years, and you kept extending? Because
I intended to come for 1 or 2 years.
That's what I
Because
thought.
then, well, at least I knew I was, at that time I thought I was going to retire at 65. I ended up being 10 years.
Was much needed. So how did you feel about it? Was that enjoyable, or
Oh, yeah.
I guess if you extended it that long, you must have loved it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that you guys have been like really involved in missionary work, on missions, and just like the way you live your life. So what kind of role has missionary work played in your life? Like in the past, right now, and what you see in the future?
Absolutely. A lot. We got married in 1969, and in October conference of 1969, and I don't remember this, but in the priesthood session, President McKay's last talk was given. It was read, I think, by his son or one of the other general authorities. And in it, he said every active, I think it was in the priesthood session, he said every active priesthood holder ought to be able to bring somebody into the church every year. I didn't, in those days there was no TV of conference, particularly the priesthood session.
Right.
And so I don't remember hearing that, but I've read the talk since. However, 5 years later, President Kimball was the prophet, and he did a film strip called Go Ye Into All the World. I don't know if you remember seeing that. It was so impactful to me that I can even close my eyes and see where I was in the seating in the gym.
Wow.
when I saw that. I mean, it just he talked about gospel going to parts of the world, and then them having enough to send missionaries to other. It was just it was a wonderful vision of the world. And during that presentation, he reiterated what President McKay had said about every active family. He said every active family ought to be able.
Because wasn't it President McKay that he started the Every Member a Missionary?
Yeah, that was before then. But every active family ought to be able to bring somebody into the church every year. And so we decided to set that as our family goal. And so that's been our goal since then, and we've had...
And that made all the difference, because up until then we hadn't had any success
at
at all.
We hadn't even had anybody in our home despite trying to... But as it says in Preach My Gospel, goals and plans are acts of faith. So you make a goal, but you have just no idea how it's going to come about, and yet it does. And so we've had easily 50 experiences.
That's awesome.
In our time.
So you filled how many missions?
So I filled my first mission. Then I went to a conference of doctors and members of the church in Nauvoo, and right the same year that it was dedicated. In there, Dr. Harris, who was the first director of missionary medical, made a plea saying, if any of you are interested in taking care of missionaries, please come and see me. So I talked to him, and so I got an official call to be even though I sort of volunteered to take care of missionaries in our mission, but I got an official call as the mission medical advisor in the Seattle mission. And the mission president was his name was Alonzo Hinckley. So it was kind of funny when he would call my home, somebody,
to get your attention.
And one of the kids would pick it up, say, "Hey, Dad, President Hinckley's on the phone."
That definitely would get your attention.
Because he was this was like in 1982, and after that was over, the stake president called me and said, "Do you want to re-up?" Because that first call was like an official missionary call, and then they had changed the service missionary things to be administered by the local stake president. And I said, I'd rather I'll continue to do the same thing, but I'll do it in the spirit of Section 58 of the Doctrine and Covenants. And so I continued to do that. And shortly after we moved here, I had met Dr. Doty, who was the director of Missionary Medical, and he called and asked if I would be the area medical advisor for the Northwest. So we served 2 years, and we were serving as that when Colleen had her recurrence of her illness, and then had the stem cell transplant, and then eventually passed away. And I got to the general authority that I reported to every month was a brand new general authority from England, Elder Kieran.
Oh, really?
So we got to know him
Are
really
you
well.
apostle?
Yeah. We were excited to hear
That's
about
awesome.
Colleen.
Yeah.
So I sent an email out when Colleen passed away, and both he and Jeanne, his wife, called and very tearfully expressed their condolences. It was just a beautiful, beautiful call.
So when I think about that, speaking of Colleen, who I love, she and Martin were in my home quite a bit when they were dating. I just love both of them. When I think of that experience that your family went through with that, I just remember strength, how strong you guys were through all that. And I'm sure you had your moments, but the face that you presented to me, at least, was just full of faith and strength. And this is hard, but we know where she's at and what she's doing.
And that can happen when you're hard-hearted, you know.
I've seen that happen, so I know what you're saying. So when I think of that experience, I see this question that we ask sometimes: what's the most faith-promoting experience you've had in your life? What was that like for your family, as far as your faith and how you feel about the gospel? And
in reference to Colleen, I think it just reminds you how grateful we are for the gospel and for the knowledge that we have of where she is and what she's doing, knowing that she's in a good place. I think people have asked me before, how do you deal with it? Well, it's a lot easier dealing with that than worrying about the kids who are straying.
Sure, absolutely.
I think it was almost harder to lose our son this last year, but again, the gospel is what gives us the strength to continue and to know that at some point things will be okay.
I just think it's so admirable when you can go through hard times like that and come out better on the other side because of the way you went through it. And that's what I've seen with your family. You guys have had a lot of struggles like everybody else, and I've only been aware of a few, but I've just seen you come through those. So just like what the Savior would have us do as we're going through hard times. So
can I say something?
Did you have it? Sure.
So when we were in Bellevue, I was called to serve as bishop. This was in 1987 for about 5.5 years, and then seminary for 3 years after that. Those were really important times. But the biggest surprise was 6 weeks after Colleen passed away, being called to be bishop of this ward. So it was 25 years to the month between the two callings.
It's amazing.
We were serving the mission at the time. That was when he was the area medical advisor here. I didn't get to finish that mission. They had to release us from the mission. So when we went to Missouri for the first time, COVID happened and they sent us home early. We were able to finish mission from home, but we didn't get to finish in Missouri.
You've got some unfinished business.
So we went back to Missouri 1.5 years later, and Amy got sick. I still have not been able to finish a mission.
So we had to finish it from home.
You finished missions, Jeannie. You finished many.
But
many.
I think the hardest part about Colleen was from the time, which was like December of 2010, November or December, when the cancer reoccurred, and then she went through chemo up in Spokane for several weeks, and then went to the stem cell transplant, and Jeannie went with her, was there for 6 months, and I would.
Amy actually was involved in that, wasn't she?
Yeah, she donated
T cells.
Yeah, she did. It was a very hard time spiritually, because every prayer was a prayer for a miracle, and And when it looked like it was going to happen, like they came home in August, and she was clear, and
given a clean slate.
And it had been a great success. And then we were at Trinity was going to be baptized the last weekend of September. And that Thursday, it was the Thursday of the fair, wasn't it?
We were actually on our way to the fair in the car when she got a call from the doctor
Yeah.
saying it was
reoccurred.
bad.
So we decided, because a lot of people were there, we were going to give her a blessing after the baptism, and I was the voice for the blessing. And I just couldn't say that she would be cured. I pretty much knew that she wasn't going to survive, but I did bless her that she would be healed, and that healing did occur through not just her, but her family and for many of the family members. But when President Perez called me to be bishop, I didn't feel like I had received an answer to prayer for over a year. Because of course I was praying for something
some other answer.
I wanted.
Yeah, some other answer.
And so the struggle to choose counselors and knowing that I had to do that through inspiration was a very, very hard one, but gratifying.
Well, your service there blessed my family tremendously, and we just are so appreciative of it. I just feel like Lewiston Second Ward has been so blessed to have you and Jeannie here and be a part of our ward. So I think I'd just like to ask you, what do you love about Lewiston Second Ward? Or maybe, do you love Lewiston Second Ward?
Well, it's home.
Right.
Yeah, this is home.
Yeah.
And I love the place, but I love the people. I think
It's so
the
interesting that
people-
you call this home when you've been here probably fewer years than other places.
the people are just. Yeah, we go back to Seattle, and Seattle is not home.
Not home anymore.
Not home.
That's great. We love that Lewiston's your home. So in closing,
But
this has
it
been
is
so great.
but it is the people.
It is definitely the people. I feel the same way.
I mean, I think when I was bishop, we really opened up the ward to the
outline.
outlying that,
so
that
much.
had been ignored.
Yes, and it brought them.
And we have so many
brought them right in.
So many good relationships.
So many. It's been so great. So, last question. I almost hate to shut this down because I've enjoyed it so much, but if you could send one message 100 years into the future for your posterity to hear, what would it be? Jeannie?
Take him first.
Mulloy?
To
you first.
About that.
Okay.
Oh, dear.
I think I would want them to adhere to the doctrine of Christ, to be faithful, and to do the things that they need to do, follow the commandments, live righteous lives. The only way to eternal salvation is through Christ. And I want my family and my descendants to know that. This is more important than anything that happens on earth. We need to get back. We need to have that eternal salvation that will give us the joy that Heavenly Father wants us to have. And you do that through living the doctrine of Christ.
Mulloy?
One thing that I learned this year when our son passed away, he had not been active in the church since his mid-teens, but yet he was kind. People loved him. He'd give you the shirt off his back. And in preparing remarks for his memorial, I got insight to what's really, really, really important. I mean, it is important to have the fellowship of the saints and to make covenants with Heavenly Father, but I think our three children that aren't active are all just really good people. They're good friends. They serve in the people around him. And I think that's
I think that's the most important thing. I think you can have people that are members of the church and go to church every Sunday and not have those qualities. And in the afterlife, I think the ones with those qualities are the ones that are going to be prized. So I have much more confidence because of that experience and the prayers in the eventual reunions with my children who are inactive on the other side, even if they don't choose to come back in this life. That we'll be together and they'll understand better.
Mm-hmm. I'm just so glad to hear you say that, because we all have people. I have people in my family that are not active, but they're such good people.
Yeah.
And that's the impressions I've gotten lately as I've prayed for them, is that these people have qualities that we should all have. So I think that's such a good message to leave.
God loves them.
God loves them, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mulloy and Jeannie. We're going to wrap it up. We're just so grateful that you've let us into your home tonight. It's been so great. So
I'm sorry we took an hour more than
no worries.
you planned.
That's no worries. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you.